I watched countless videos about how pop music nowadays just repeats the same 4 chords on all their songs, but listening to a lot of older music, I realized that they didn't always sound this way. They didn't always use the same chord progression we're used to hearing now. So I want to go through the most popular chord progressions of the last 7 decades, talk about how they work, why they work so well, including variations of the super popular and iconic modern pop song progression. Starting in the 50s, the most popular progression we got is what's known as the rock and roll progression. So it's basically a shorter version of the popular blues progression. So the blues progression uses the 1-4-5 chords from the key. In the case of the key of E, that would be E, A, and B chords. So the blues progression uses the chords in the order 1-4-1, 5-4-1, and spans across 12 bars, so super long. But the rock and roll progression cuts it down to just 1, 4, 1, 5, 1. So we start off on the 1 chord from a super stable place. Then we go to the 4 chord, which is a really stable transition because, well, the 4 chord is also a major chord, plus it's a common transition chord. Then we come right back to the 1 chord before going to the 5 chord, which adds a little bit of tension since the 5 chord naturally has a tendency to want to go back to the 1 home chord. But that's how we do right away. We go right back to the 1 chord, quickly resolving that tension. So the rock and roll progression is a very stable sounding progression because it repeats the 1 home chord so much, 3 times in total. The benefit being that it allows, or gives the instrument player, in this case the guitar player, space to play with the chords and make them sound really rhythmic and harmonically complex without making the progression sound too crazy. They kind of repeat this really bluesy, dancey rhythm. So this super stable sounding progression makes it great for dance music because it allows us to spice up the rhythm more easily. And not to mention, the chords here are actually pretty interesting too if you look at them closely. We're not just playing like E major chord, the 1 chord. We're actually alternating between playing the E minor chord and E major chord. So it makes for a very spicy sound despite the chord progression being so simple. If the progression were to be more varied and complex, it'll be hard to make the chords on top more rhythmic and harmonically complex, like these rock and roll songs are doing. If you're interested in learning more about common tricks artists use to spice up the chords for a melancholic and complex sound, check out this video where I go through the most popular chord trick used on love songs. Next, come the early 60s, we got what's known as the doo-wop progression. Ironically though, the other name for the progression is actually the 50s progression. But a lot of the iconic songs using the progression were actually released in the 60s, not the 50s. So the progression goes like 1, 6, 4, 5. Popular songs using the progression in the 60s include
Oh, stand by me.
So this progression is called the doo-wop because doo-wop refers to the style of music back in the day where the songs sounded more a cappella-y. So the doo-wop progression is a very versatile, well-rounded, and royal sounding progression that sounds good on its own without us having to spice it up with complicated rhythm or harmony like the rock and roll progression. So we start off on the 1 home chord. So again, starting from a very simple, stable place, then we go to the 6 minor chord, which adds a little bit of melancholy since it's a minor chord, but it's really smooth melancholy because the 6 minor chord for key is often known to be the sibling chord for the 1 home chord. So we're really just going to the sadder sibling. Then we go to the 4 chord, which continues that sense of yearning and melancholy from the 6 minor chord a little bit, since the 4 chord for key is often known to be used as a transition chord. So it makes the listener kind of anticipate and think like, hey, what's going to happen next? Finally, we go to the 5 chord, which adds a very hopeful vibe. And again, really smooth transition because it's 1 step above from the 4 chord that came before. Plus it's a major chord. Besides that, the 5 chord of a key has strong desire to go back home to the 1 home chord, and that's exactly what we do as we repeat this progression. So just really smooth transitions all throughout. Essentially what a progression is doing is that it's carefully building tension by going to the 6th minor chord, then the 4 major transition chord, and then finally the 5 chord that wants to go back home. It's doing so all the while making sure the transitions between chords are really smooth by playing chords in a sequence in a way where the chords that are played back to back relate to each other. So it makes for a very satisfying sound, despite having all these interesting tension. It's like a very well-directed film. Now, sometime in the late 60s, we started getting this modern pop song progression, and it's still used on countless hits to this day. So it's really a variation of the doo-wop progression from earlier. So doo-wop progression uses 1, 6, 4, 5, and this modern pop song progression goes like 1, 5, 6, 4. It's used on countless pop hits throughout the years, like
In times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me. Just a small town girl, living in a... Well, you done me and you bet I felt it.
It's hard to say exactly which song started using this progression first, but the Beatles using it on their song Let It Be in the late 60s definitely helped popularize the use of this progression. Again, this pop song progression uses the exact same chords as the doo-wop progression from the early 60s, except in a different order for more unexpected transitions for a more kind of melancholic sound. So with this progression, we don't really get the resolution we want until at the very end when we repeat the progression and go back to the 1 home chord. So starting on the stable 1 home chord, we then quickly jump to the 5 major chord, which is a bit of a far jump, but not extremely off-putting since the 1 and 5 chords of a key are kind of like family chords, since scientifically they kind of share a similar sound with this concept known as overtones. Though after that, as mentioned before, the 5 chord of a key has a tendency to want to go back home to the 1 home chord, but that's not what we do next. We go to the 6 minor chord next, which adds introspection and just disappointment since it's like, well, I thought we were going to go home, but instead we're at this minor chord. But it's not too eerie of a transition since, again, the 6 minor chord of a key is the sibling chord for the 1 home chord. Plus, it's only 1 step above from the 5 chord that came before it. But it's just not the ending we wanted. So after that, it's like, okay, are we finally going to go home now? But instead, we go to the 4 major chord, which is often used as a transition chord. So it's like, okay, fine, we're not home yet, but I know we're at the transfer station. We need to go back home, I hope. That's what makes this progression more emotional. We keep delaying gratification. We first go to the 5 chord that wants to go back home, but we don't let it. We go to the 6 minor chord after that. And then we go to the transfer station next. That's what makes this progression work so well, all these unexpected and just interesting turns. Finally, in the 80s, we started getting this more emo but satisfying sounding progression. What makes this progression different too is that it starts in the minor key. So it goes like 1, flat 6, flat 3, flat 7. It's been used on countless popular songs throughout the years since the 80s, like
What would I do without your smart mouth?
So here we're playing in the key of A minor. But another way to look at this progression is to look at it from the major key perspective. So the relative major key for the A minor key is C major, meaning that both of these keys share the exact same notes. So looking at it from the perspective of C major, we would get 6, 4, 1, 5, which is actually just the reverse of the pop song progression from earlier, the 1, 5, 6, 4, except we reverse the first and second half for 6, 4, 1, 5. It's also hard to say exactly how this progression came about, but my guess is that at some point, artists needed a minor version of the pop song progression from earlier, so they decided to flip that progression so that the progression would start off on a minor chord. So this progression has an emo but satisfying sound since we start off on the 6 minor chord, which is a minor chord, so it kind of gives a sad vibe. Plus, it's the first chord of a progression, so it colors the entire progression with kind of a sadder tone. Then very quickly, we move to the 4 major chord, which is, again, a major chord and often used as a transition chord. So it's like, wow, it's already starting to get better. Then we go home to the 1 home chord. So it's like, wow, we're back home already. And finally, we go to the 5 major chord, which adds to the happy and cheerful vibe since it's a major chord too. Plus, we already played 2 major chords before it. So it's like, nice. There's even a party back home. That's awesome. The way I like to think about this progression is that it's like a middle school kid going through a heartbreak, but gets quickly comforted by the adults around him. So it's like very innocent pain with quick relief. I still saying, popular pop music progressions used to be way simpler, like during the rock and roll era, but eventually more chords and different combinations started getting added, so the progressions themselves can sound inherently interesting without the instrument player needing to do too much by adding complicated rhythm or harmony on top. If you're interested in learning more about how pop music progressions evolved in other cultures, check out this video where I go through the most popular Japanese chord progressions of the last 4 decades. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.